Good evening, Mount Olive. We want to welcome you back to another night of Bible study as we continue this series, actually the last installment for this month, as it is the end of the month, Becoming Change Agents. We're so glad you joined us. We want to ask you, as always, to like, share it if you're on Facebook or even on YouTube. And if you have any questions, we're more than happy to answer it in the chat. So please put it in there. We will like to start off with a word of prayer. So why don't you join me? God, thank you for your grace and your mercy. Thank you for your word that continues to, after 2,000 years, still speak life to us. So we thank you for that. We pray, God, that your spirit will be here with us and continue to lead us into all truth so that we can become more like your son, Jesus. This we ask in his holy and precious name. Amen.
Amen.
We're joined by none other than our pastor, the Reverend Dr. James Victor. Good to see you, sir.
Likewise.
Happy Memorial Day. Do people post Memorial Day? All right, happy Memorial Day week.
It's Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday. It is a Wednesday. And we're continuing in this series, Becoming Change Agents. Now, for the past few weeks, we've been looking at Acts. We have been looking at we've been looking at, a couple of times we've been in Acts, turning the world upside down, understanding your assignment in John 11, the story of Lazarus. Then last week was Let It Burn, about the seven sons of Sceva?
Yeah.
And this week we're going to now make a turn and look at the ultimate change agent, and that's none other than Jesus, who is the Christ. So, get it started. We're going to jump and look at Luke chapter 13, reading from verse 10 through 17. That is Luke 13, verses 10 through 17. And the word of the Lord reads, "Now Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. And just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and was quite unable to stand straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, 'Woman, you are set free from your ailment.' When he laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, 'There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on one of those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath day.' But the Lord answered him and said, 'You hypocrites, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to give water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from the bondage on this Sabbath day?' When he said this, all his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things that he was doing." The word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. So we now have dropped into, where are they? They're in Galilee, right? I think they're in Galilee now. We dropped down into this story, which is a pretty familiar story. I think it is a pretty familiar story about this crippled woman. And as we know, Luke, the physician, always has this tendency to healing is his thing. Healing and the Holy Spirit, that's what you're going to find in Luke, right? But he goes into great detail talking about, as he does a lot of time, Jesus was teaching, and there appeared this woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 long years.
Yeah. And the interesting thing that as you were reading the text, I saw, and Jesus saw her. Mm-hmm. So the text almost intimates that she was a regular.
Yeah.
In synagogue attendance.
Yeah.
But in some respects, she was invisible.
Yeah. Her pain was invisible.
Her pain, yeah.
Not even her pain, but just her.
Yeah, and Jesus saw her, which seems to be, to me, in contradistinction to her invisibility.
Yeah.
In the household of faith, in the faith community, which that presents a problem for faith communities because we may be blinded by those who are different.
Yeah.
But yes, but she's here. She has what many would say medically is osteoporosis. She's bent over, and she's been in this way, in this condition for 18 years.
Yeah.
Unable to stand up. And can you imagine living 18 years and the only thing that you can see is the top of your feet?
Yeah, for 18
For
long
18
years.
long
I mean, that's what the
years.
text says. You know, and I think I find it, there's a couple of things that I find fascinating about this woman is that despite her condition, she still went to the synagogue, right? So she didn't even allow that, which I could imagine is painful, right? But to just be in that condition, she still made her way to the synagogue. And I like what you said. I didn't recognize that till you said it. Jesus saw her. She didn't ask. You know, it's not like one of the other ones that are like crying out, Jesus, save me. Maybe, I don't know if that's a matter of she didn't know who Jesus was. Maybe it could be a little bit of, she was like, I've been in this situation for so long. I don't even pray about this anymore. Like, it's just what it is. I became kind of numb.
Resigned
to
her condition.
To her condition. But whatever it is, Jesus made the first step toward her. When he saw her, he's there teaching, and in comes this woman, and he kind of will stop one of his teachings just to see her and to be seen by Jesus.
Yeah. And I think it also speaks to her enormous faith. As you said, if we are reading the text correctly, and she has been rendered invisible by the faith community and is only known by her condition. So she's a woman with a problem, and she's only known by her problem. Text doesn't even bother to give her a name, no sense of her background, her journey, not even how she got in this condition other than an evil spirit has dominated her for this long period of time. She's invisible, but as you said, she still comes.
Yeah.
And that I think speaks volumes to her level of faith. And then, you know, like I said earlier, that presents a challenge for us in faith communities, for we ought to be sighted to see the unseen.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, a lot of times, and even though it was probably easier for us to see what she is facing because she's crippled, and she, actually, I do not actually like calling her crippled, but she was bent over for this 18 years. But I wonder how many of us also come to church with sometimes the invisible things that we are dealing with. And I mean, you'd be surprised how like sometimes a smile and just a hello can help turn some of those invisible things or start to just address them or help turn them around. But it's just good to be seen. It's just the first step to just see someone and see what they are. And see them beyond their condition.
I was going to say, not just see what they are, but who they are.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that becomes, and so she's here. She's in the synagogue, which will be comparable to church.
Yeah.
She's in the synagogue on the day of Sabbath.
Sunday morning.
Comparable to us, which Friday night for them.
Yeah.
At sundown till Saturday sundown. And the culture has become so legalistic that what Jesus does is viewed as an anomaly. Let me reframe that. It's viewed as a violation, not just an anomaly. It is an anomaly, but more aptly put, it's a violation of their cultural rules.
Absolutely.
And what Jesus really does, I think, here is helps bring some sight to the rest of the community. And in doing so, there's a clarity of vision around what's really important. Yes. So he's clashing with the culture, because when he heals this woman, text says he touches her, and I think it says immediately she stood up. which is probably ethos in the Greek. Immediately she stands up, so she's restored, and she starts praising the Lord.
Yeah.
Here is where the text gets to be even more problematic. One of the preachers says, start saying loudly, and we had a discussion about this in the green room. There are 6 days. Work can be done on the other days.
Yeah.
This is a violation of our customs, of our laws. And we had a discussion on whether the chief priest is indicting the woman for being healed or whether he's indicting Jesus for healing her. Yeah. Text, I think it's more of a blanket, and it covers both of them. So can you imagine the indignity of having to walk around 18 years? You finally are set free from this demonic possession. You're able to stand up, and then the person who should have been ministering to you says, it's your fault.
It's your fault. Because it says in the text, we could read this in the text in verse 18. There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath day. I mean, it's a wild argument, right? To say you could be healed any other day. Like, you should have came here last night, the day after. There's 6 other days you can choose from. And he kind of blames the woman, right? But he's blaming Jesus as well, right? But he blames this woman for being healed. And honestly, she ain't asked for it.
Right.
She didn't want it.
Because Jesus calls her
Jesus
out.
tells her all she did was walk forward. And Jesus' hand, he touched her, and she stood up straight. That's the only work that she did, was walk forward, which they all did to get
there, right?
To get to the synagogue,
They didn't
right?
have any teletransportation.
So she's getting all this blame, and Jesus is being chastised indirectly, to a certain extent, to say, it's the Sabbath day. We have an order. There's a way. Things must be done in decency and in order, right? We have a way in which things should be done around here, and you're violating the custom and the culture of our place. And I guess something to think about, sometimes culture, and I mean, Niebuhr does a whole long thing on this. We talked about Niebuhr, so that's why he's in my head, right? But there's a way in which culture can be, at times, could get in the way of what God wants to do, right? And we have many different cultures. We could talk larger culture, from the macro to talk about society and all that, but also individually. We have church cultures, and we have family cultures, and work cultures getting a huge thing, right? There's many different cultures, and sometimes many of those cultures, because they are human systems, they can become antithetical to what the gospel is trying to do.
And I think that's what we see here. The faith community loses sight of what's most important.
Yeah.
Which is the health and wholeness of an individual who has been disabled, been tormented by this evil spirit. And you would think that the whole community would rejoice.
Yeah.
And they eventually do, but we'll get to that. But there's this one dominant person in leadership who has to be the gatekeeper of culture.
Yeah.
And so Jesus is the quintessential change agent, because he dares to confront the culture and the custom.
And the leadership.
And the leadership, yes.
Yeah.
With a higher sense of urgency and what's important, which is wholeness.
And and this goes to question, I guess, as we're thinking about becoming change agents, and we talked about using our gifts last month, and we're thinking about becoming change agents, I think there is sometimes a hesitancy to challenge leadership, right? And whether that's in the church, whether that is the president, sometimes there's just this hesitancy because we think that we are going against God if we do that. Now, I want to be careful here. I'm not trying to get you a whole bunch of like hate mail tomorrow, right? Like, we're not saying that you should use it, but I think even Jesus provides a model for how we should engage and how we should challenge and how we should critique the culture. There's a way in which we'll find out the gospel clashes with the culture, but there's also the gospel helps to critique culture, and being a change agent involves that, right?
Right, and I think you hit the nail on the head that we must be motivated to pursue what is ultimate, what is right, what is grounded in the kingdom rather than the system.
Yeah.
And rather than the culture and rather than the custom. Because we can elevate culture and custom to idols.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think how Jesus is challenging, we talked a little bit about this, but Jesus is challenging on behalf of one of the least of these in society. And I think you can never go wrong to a certain extent. There's one thing to advocate for yourself, like, Pastor, I believe I should be the head of the usher board, and you're not seeing my way right on this, right? That's one way of challenge, or going and challenging culture just to challenge culture's sake, right? But if you're advocating for the least of these, I think you put yourself in a good position, right? I'm not doing this for myself, but for someone else. And Jesus stands up to this leader advocating for this woman who has been in this situation for 18 years.
And so intrinsic in that is a risk. Jesus is taking a major risk to stand for and beside and with and on behalf of someone that's been marginalized.
Yeah.
Because had he just kept teaching, and even if he had seen her and done nothing, which may have been the greater sin to have seen her and done nothing, but he sees her, calls her out, he now moves the focus from the status quo, what's considered normal, to what now is emerging as what I would say, and we'll get to this eventually, a new norm. My contention is wherever you see prophetic witness and prophetic vision and prophetic engagement and activity, what you see is the emergence of new norms predicated on kingdom realities and principles. And so here, the prophetic presence of the Lord takes a risk, goes against the grain. That's the title of the lesson. He's going against the grain, because the grain is 6 days. You got to get healed. On the 7th, we don't do anything. And so there's always a risk, and you have to be aware of the risk. I think even the Lord taught, no man goes to war without first taking assessment of the adversary and your own resources.
Absolutely,
You know,
no one buys a field or plows a field without thinking about it. It's this whole, you don't go to build a house without measuring it and doing all that. Consider all the cost.
That. You got to consider the cost. You got to consider the risk. It is a risk. But what the Lord shows us is the risk is worth it, because it's on behalf of someone that's been marginated, been abused and oppressed, and been ignored and rendered invisible for 18 years. That's worth it.
Yeah, and I think there's as kind of alluded to a little bit, I think the motive is important here. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? Because I think sometimes we could be rabble-rousing just to rabble-rouse, right? Or
some folks just to get in front of the TV camera.
Just get in front of the TV camera, There's a lot of folks who just enjoy that, right? And that's just what they do. But if you're really standing up for others and being a change agent in whatever culture we want to talk about, work culture, church culture, larger American culture,
Western
culture, whichever cultural scene you want to play in and be a change agent in, or your family culture, there is a risk to it, but it's important to check your motives on why you're doing it and who are you standing up for and who are you representing in this case. So, but Jesus has some really strong words for him. For this rabbi.
That's a nice euphemism.
For this leader of the synagogue, right? He says, "You hypocrites." Woo, that's how we're starting this off. All right, and there's an exclamation point there, but that's the translators. But you hypocrites, does not each one of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or donkey from the manger and lead it away to give water? So he's like, y'all already do some work here.
Yeah, it's a critique.
It's a critique, yeah.
So he clashes with culture, then he critiques culture. And I think that's, again, a part of the formula, if you will. Sometimes we just get angry, but Jesus is providing a critique of the culture. You say there should be no work, but you're already working.
Yeah.
So why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't I have healed this woman on the Sabbath?
Yeah.
And then it's almost like, what's more important, the ox or the person?
Yeah.
Or what's the donkey or the person?
Yeah.
Because if you say an ass is more important than a person, and an ox is more important, then you got to question your sanity.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is really at work here? What's important? So again, he's elevating these cultural norms through his critique.
Yeah.
People are more important, and their well-being, to use the word now that's been going around, their thriving is more important than just the adherence to these Sabbath rules. Now, we did have a question sent in preparation for tonight as to the Sabbath.
Yeah.
So let's kind of just dabble with that. I don't want to dive deeply into it.
Well, let's finish this thought, his response.
Okay.
And then we could go back to the Sabbath, right? He said, and ought not this woman, because now here comes the elevation, right? Ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has bound for 18 years long, be set from this bondage on the Sabbath day, right? So he not only calls her a woman, but he calls her, a daughter of Abraham at the time is like being called like a child of God.
Right. It's not only a term of endearment, but it's a term of acceptance and belonging.
Absolutely.
She too, and the implication here and the inference is she too is a daughter of Abraham.
Yeah.
Which, is to suggest that she has been viewed as something less than a daughter of Abraham. And so just in that cultural context, again, what's more important, a daughter of Abraham or a donkey? Yeah.
And that's the rhetorical kind of like scene that he's painting for the crowd. Is like, which one is more important? And everyone will say a human. And even within Jewish law and Jewish thinking, like there's this Sabbath, all rules can be broken for the saving and preservation of human life. That is generally the rule. Now, some people are a little bit more legalistic. They said, well, she wasn't dying. That's probably what he'll say. He could come tomorrow.
Come tomorrow.
And be cured. If he could do it today, he could do it tomorrow, right? And
then that's why I was talking about the urgency. Jesus is like, why not now?
Why not now? Yeah.
I'm reminded of the Ethiopian eunuch. What prevents us? There's water. Why not now? We can do this now.
Yeah.
In fact, there is what Paul Tillich talks about, the urgency of now.
Yeah.
That you cannot delay what God is trying to do presently.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think you said it a little bit like, I think the greater sin, you said it, you glossed over it a little bit. You said the greater sin would be for you to see it and not do nothing, right? And I think it takes a certain level of empathy to say, if you're that crippled and you've been in this situation for 18 years, but I don't know, I guess from a point of view, Jesus knew all things, knew that she was in this situation for 18 years. But if we strip that away, right?
And knew that the source of her disability is demonic in nature, which we don't get a sense of that at the beginning of the text. So this is, again, showing the omniscience of the Savior.
Yeah, but even if we strip some of that omniscience away, right? Jesus just saw this woman in this condition, and he said, I have to do something now, right? Moved with compassion or whatever it is, he has to do something now. And I think that's for us, as being change agents and becoming change agents, there is a certain urgency for, as you said, moving now. And the greater sin is if we see it and don't do anything. If you can do it, just go ahead and do it. And I think that's always the case with Jesus in the sense of urgency. He said, don't put off anything for tomorrow that you could do today. Because
what Dr. King says, it's always the right time to do good.
Right. Yeah.
Or to do right, something like that.
Like now is always the time, and delay becomes denial, right? I think that's Dr. King, Birmingham jail. So he kind of sets this all up to really say that today's the day. I see her right here, right now. I will stop my teaching, stop what I was doing, because now's the time. And as I think about the Gospels, I don't think anybody ever made an appointment to see Jesus, right?
Well, you could make the case for, who was the man that had the dying daughter?
Jairus?
Jairus.
But
in I think it's Mark, he comes. And then Matthew or maybe Luke's version, he is a Roman official and sends one of his servants to make the request, come see my daughter, she's dying. So you could make that, but
generally it's in the, but even then, once that Roman soldier got to Jesus, he just spoke the word, if that's Jairus' daughter, right? He just spoke the word, and by the time they got home, all was well. So there's this certain urgency that Jesus had, and maybe John will say he's pushing toward the cross, so everything must happen now because glorification is happening. But, I think there's this certain urgency. I think we probably get a little lackadaisical on our calling to just deal with things right now, get it done now. So we did get this question about the Sabbath day, so we could turn to that question, and that's always, one of the questions was, what is the Sabbath day to Christians? And I guess the larger question is, how does Jesus become the Sabbath rest? Because there's just so many. You want me to read a little more?
Yeah, because I'm a little confused by the question.
Here we go. Thank you for sending in this question. But today, the question goes, today in many Christian groups, there's a misunderstanding and misinterpretation of the meaning of the Sabbath day. Genesis 2, verse 2 mentions God rested from all his work of creation on the seventh day. Exodus 28 and 8 says, remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. There appears to be a contrast or difference between God's rest and human's rest. Isaiah 40:28 says, God, the creator of the earth, does not grow tired or weary. Question is, what is the Sabbath day to Christians, and how does Jesus become the Sabbath rest? And I can answer the second one.
Let me take the first one then. What is Sabbath? Sabbath was the day of rest. And you're right, it is not that God, as an all-powerful creator, needed to rest, but chose to rest. And I think we talked a little bit about that when we did the 7 days of creation, how that Sabbath is in and of itself a creation. He creates the Sabbath, which means that it has purpose, and its purpose is rest. And it is the only one, if you go back to Genesis and you recall our previous discussion, it is the only day that has no end. If you look at the text, and the evening and the morning were the first day, and the evening and the morning were the second day. Sabbath has no end.
Well, that's very rabbinical. I like it.
And so there is to use Hebrew, which is your favorite book, there still remains a rest.
That's what she quoted from.
For the people of God. So, the rest takes place, I think, on two levels. One, the Jews recognize that there is a rhythm of life that Sabbath governs. I'm still reading Heschel, and that's one of his articles that I read, that you can't be Jewish and deny the Sabbath. It's too intricately a part of the Jewish identity. It's also a part of the Christian identity. We just got different days, and depends on different Christian groups.
Yeah,
You got
sure.
different days, but the concept, the principle is the same. That there should be a day when we set aside our normal routines for a replenishment of the psyche, of the mind, the spirit, and even the body.
Yeah.
Because you can get tired just going and going and going all of the time. But then that's at a practical level. At theological level, then Jesus is the one that remaineth a rest for the people of God.
Yeah.
Jesus is that rest
Yeah.
for us. And I think her question is, how does he become that?
Yeah.
He becomes that because that's who he's created to be.
Yeah.
But he becomes that, that's at a objective level. At a subjective level, we do that when we acknowledge the need for the Christ, the need to have a rest. It's almost like what Augustine said, we shall not find rest until we find our rest in thee.
Yeah.
So a rest in the Lord doesn't mean that that you stop working, or that you even won't have troublesome days, but it does suggest that there's a certain kind of calm to your spirit.
Yeah.
Because there's a deep abiding trust that all things are going to work for good.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. I mean,
No.
that's my take on the second part of the question.
Yeah,
as I continue to work through it.
Yeah, I think Hebrews and the person who posed the question references the Hebrew text, Hebrews 4, 9, and 10. And I think the writer of Hebrews, from that context, kind of makes everything that happened in the temple and Jewish life a symbol and a sign toward Christ. And in doing that, they also take up the Sabbath rest as a sign of Christ, that Christ is actually that eternal rest that we enter into, that we can lay down and settle from all of our anxieties, all of our worries, and even theologically from our anxieties and from our worries. So we enter into it, and once we enter into Him, we then find that kind of rest for our souls. That's how Christ becomes our Sabbath rest.
And then we can even go back to Genesis, and that has no end.
And that has no end. So Jesus is like going back to Eden, right? To a certain extent, right? But it's going back to that creation moment before sin and destruction all happened, and we re-enter into the rest that the Lord has for us.
Yeah. That's a very good question.
Yeah.
And the next series we're going to be talking about self-care, and Sabbath is one of the topics. So I don't want to dive too deeply.
Yeah.
I want to stay still on the change agent piece.
But,
and we talked a little bit about in the green room how Jesus again models for us how to be the change agent.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a bullhorn, but he simply turns things around by asking a poignant question. Ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, be liberated? And is she not, I'm paraphrasing, isn't she more important than a donkey or an ox?
Yeah.
He asked a question.
Yeah.
And the question is grounded in his vision of what ought to be. Actually, in the kingdom, what is.
What is, yeah.
And so I think when we can ask those kinds of questions, what's more important? And he's refocusing a whole community to now see really the importance of this woman being renewed, being restored, being revived, being healed, as opposed to some law.
Yeah. I mean, and this goes back to the story, I think it's Luke, right? Good Samaritan story, right? And it's Luke, right? It's Luke text? I think so.
No, not the Good Samaritan. That's
Matthew?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I never learned scripture like that. Book, chapter, and verse. That ain't my baby.
It's in one of the Gospels, right?
You give me a story though, I can tell you. I can tell you that.
I don't think it's Mark though. It's too long of a story to find its way in Mark, right? It's either Matthew or Luke, right? But I think it may be Luke. All right. Anyway, someone Google it and tell us in the chat, right? But it goes back to that story of the Good Samaritan, right? Because again, we had the priest and we had the Levite, right? This man is ill and was just robbed and burglarized and beaten and close to death, and the priest and Levite had their custom and they had to go to the temple. I mean, for the Levite, because they were on a rotation, if he missed it, it would be years before he'll be able to serve in the temple again, right? So this was like a high honor to go at the time, and it was commanded by law that they should go. The priest had to remain pure lest he goes into the holies of holies and funky stuff happens, right?
And get killed in the sanctum sanctorum and drug out by a rope.
Exactly. So there was good reason for them to pass him on by, right? But Jesus calls the Samaritan good, right? And because all those laws and all the things still come down to Jesus says this, it still comes down to the two major things: love God and love your neighbor as yourself, right? And when you see this woman who has been in this condition for such a long time, for 18 years, as far as you know, Jesus only knew this person for a couple hours. And he said, I must do something. And if he had the power to do something, he would do it. And I think that is how we are change agents. And whatever power we have, whatever privilege we have, any of those things, if we have the power to change and disrupt a particular system, if we don't do it, then I think we're going to have a hard time, according to Matthew 25, right? That is, right? But if we do something, we are then walking in the path of Jesus and being a change agent.
And if we talk about being change agents, what are we changing from to? And again, I think his question reveals that he's beginning to elevate the culture. Because these are still people in the faith community. They're not going to avoid that. They're not going to escape that. But he's being a good pastor. He's challenging assumptions and in what we would call embedded theologies. And he then says, the greater importance is this woman's well-being. That we talked about the urgency of now and her wholeness, and what makes what he sees as the ultimate is her freedom. Because he defines it in very, I think, strict terms. She's bound by Satan, now she's freed by God. And so what then becomes important is she's free. And anytime we see something that is binding and constricting, as you talked about earlier, then that demands some attention.
And it's our role as people who follow Christ the Liberator, right, to be in this business of liberation, of liberating people, not only within our power, whatever is in our power to do. Maybe you don't have the gift of healing, right? And you can't speak the word and lay hands and they become healed, right? But there are systems in the world that we can break down. There are issues that we can address. There's something for us, for all of us to do to aid in this liberation of people groups, all that. That is what we're called to be as change agents.
And again, part of that is just seeing people.
Seeing people, You
know, so the next time somebody, when you stop at a stop sign, they got a sign. You know, you may not have any cash. People ask for handouts now, and in a period where we're always using debit cards, I literally often don't have cash to help people anymore. And that's why some of them have gotten savvy and they got cash apps.
Really?
I saw a brother the other day, had a sign.
Hey,
he had
listen.
he had his cash app.
I'm not mad at him. Listen, I probably would give to him. I'm like, at least, listen, you put some effort into this. I can't be mad at you about this.
He had his cash app sign on there. Because again, we don't, brother, can you spare a dime? That's kind of passe now. But literally, folks may well ask for handouts, and I don't have anything to give because I don't have cash. But I at least try to recognize them, and I'll say, sorry, ma'am, I can't help you. Sorry, sir, I can't help you. And that's literally the truth. I can't help you. So, but just the recognition of their humanity in a system that dehumanizes them is, again, being countercultural. And which is what the text, I think, is really calling us toward a life of countercultural existence. Because the norm is there are 6 days, and then there's the Sabbath, and this could have been done on any other day. You could have come on Sunday morning. And could have gotten your healing, or you could have come Friday afternoon. But Jesus, like, this is mandated. And he begins to elevate this culture by helping this people understand that this woman is indeed a daughter of Abraham, and not to be compared with a donkey, which, the womanist in the room might have something more to add to that and help us with that, unpack that a little bit more. And unfold it, because I think we are in gospel territory. We just may not be able to fully understand it because of our masculinity. But he's elevating culture here, which is part of what we ought to be doing by questioning culture.
So that the dream and the vision of Revelation, that the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of God and of his Christ, right? That we should be pushing and edging the culture. And every generation comes and we push a little bit more, Sometimes we take some steps back. Lord knows we have, right? But we should be pushing, we should be the ones at the outside of the culture to a certain extent, pushing the culture toward becoming more and more like the kingdom of God.
More loving.
More
just, more generous, more kind, more gracious. You can go on and on and on. More forgiving. But that's our job.
As change agents.
And yet, while giving folks opportunities to grow and not canceling them, but also holding them accountable. We got this big thing with Diddy going on now, it amazed me that when you get in trouble, black folk always start talking about God. Now, they ain't talked about God none before.
All of a sudden, you find the Lord quick.
You ain't talked about the Lord before. Not in any of your music. You hadn't even given anything charitable to a church or anything that we know of. But when you get in trouble,
you're going to find the Lord.
You're going to find the Lord, which says something about us as a people that's both positive and can be looked at on the backside as a minus. But here, Jesus is elevating the culture simply by a question. This is a daughter of Abraham. Where do we find what's the word I want to use? The dignity and worth of individuals when they are caught in these kinds of oppressive systems. That's where we elevate the culture. Right now, even with our congregation, we are having to wrestle with, in one of our things, one of our ministries and prospects, do we challenge a system that placed a premium on pets rather than on people? And we're wrestling with that, and how do we we handle that. Y'all will be hearing more about that, And even now in the neighborhood, we have the county trying to condemn an old woman's house and take it by eminent domain so that the roads can be improved. It's an old woman, and then they won't even give her a fair price for her land. And so, there's some urgency that is required here.
Yeah.
So, if I go to jail, y'all come get me out. I'm gonna give somebody some money so that y'all can come get me out. Because there is something. This is an area where the church needs to be the church.
Yeah, and I like. There's two things I see in this text that I think is interesting, right? Two things that happen here. As we said earlier, Jesus was proactive here, right? And we talked a little about this. He called her out, right? And he went to her, right? And I think about whether it's the lady who's with her house. We don't even have to wait for. Because you have to wait for this person to even say anything. We ought to have some proactive nature on when we see issues that are just gross injustice, right? And the same thing, also, another thing I see in the text is, it's interesting, Luke, how he frames this woman. He first says a spirit that had crippled her, and a daughter of and later on, Jesus said, a daughter of Abraham whom Satan bound for 18 long years. It appears like normally, it's not being ascribed to like, oh, she did something to deserve this or anything like that. This was a system. This was, at least from the Lucan imagination, right? This was a spirit had done this to her. She didn't ask for this. She ain't want to do this or anything like this. Just been bound in this situation. And I think that goes in line with our call to be liberators in the culture, to find those things that have been bound. They didn't ask for it. They didn't want this. This poor lady, she just living in her house, right? And they want to come take it to build a road, right? For those whose backs are against the walls, that is when the religion of Jesus should start getting activated.
It's a good Thurman reference.
Yeah, I tried it. So, but he said all this, and we're running low on time, right? But he said all this, all his opponents were put to shame, which is fascinating language, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things that he was doing. Now, I know Luke, he's the same brother that wrote Acts in a very novelistic way, right? But the question I have, I'm curious to hear as well. He said all his opponents were put to shame. I only see one opponent,
which suggests that there are more. That this chief priest is the voice of the opposition. That there were folks that were like, "Nah, he know better. That's Mary's boy.
He ain't gonna be teaching the synagogue anymore.
He ain't gonna teach you no more.
Tired of him.
Yeah, he knows better."
Yeah.
So and often there is a vocal person that represents a constituency, and I think that's what the text may say here. And according to Jesus, they are in cahoots with Satan.
That's at least what
now,
Jesus.
that'll preach one day. They are in cahoots because they want her to remain bound.
Yeah.
And he's about the business of liberation.
But the entire crowd started rejoicing.
Yeah.
Right?
And they'll put to shame. But deal with the first people. They'll put to shame.
Yeah.
Because they realize he's right. She is far more important than a donkey and an ox.
Yeah.
And we've been wrong. And there's a conviction here that convicts. And that's why I said he begins to create in a almost unseen way, in an intangible way. He starts creating a new culture. Because now even the opponents will have to say there's a constituency here that sees these kinds of situations differently.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that they were put to shame, again, implies a little bit of guilt. So it's not like they weren't upset. They were just put to shame, right? They were feeling
We were wrong.
We were wrong, right? About this, which is very fascinating. But I like what you said. You're creating new cultures and shifting. Now, it's not always. There's one way you can shift cultures, but it's also creating new cultures is also part of it, because the entire crowd was rejoicing.
They start rejoicing.
They start rejoicing at all the wonderful things. So there's now new expectations and there's like a new customs and new cultures. So culture by itself is not bad, right? I would say it could be pretty neutral, right? It is what the people want, how we are acting in the culture determines whether it's good or bad.
And if we take this, if we delve into it, even the opponents are converted because the entire crowd. Now, here we'd have to delve and do a little exegetical work to see how Luke uses crowds and to see if he uses crowds as an antithesis to the Jewish leaders.
Yeah. John mostly does that, but
But we'd have to see how Luke does it. But if we just take this on face value, without having done that kind of work, then even this chief priest says, you know what, I need change. And so he starts shifting, creating a new culture here where these people will not ever see another disabled person come into the synagogue and get changed and be transformed and say something is wrong with that.
Yeah.
And I think if we can start, and this is not, Jesus hadn't done away with the whole synagogue system.
No.
It's just one synagogue in Galilee. And again, it has major ripples. He drops a pebble and there are a plenitude of ripples that come with this one action of simply seeing her, calling her out, touching her, healing her, and now she is restored and a new reality. And I think that becomes, for me, the real power of being a change agent.
Yeah.
That you can simply change a life with an act of kindness.
No, absolutely.
My daughter, when she was in first grade or second grade, there was a boy that was in a car accident. He was kind of scarred up. And the other kids were picking on this boy because he was scarred up. And she came home and was crying, Daddy, they picking on the little boy. He didn't do anything. He was in a car accident. He was scarred. I said, well, baby, they got to grow and what they're doing is wrong. Next day, when they start picking on the boy, she's ready to fight. She's ready to fight. I said, that's my girl. She's ready to fight. So I had to go up to the school because she was ready to fight. But she then is starting to create another culture, a culture of acceptance. And again, it was just, she saw the boy who had been in a car accident, who had been injured, and is now being bullied, as they didn't say then. We would just say he was teased, but now there's an official term. He was bullied, and she's ready to fight the bullies.
Yeah.
And I think she would have won because she was bigger than all the bullies at the time. These little bitty boys. This is second grade, and she was a big child. But she's starting to create a new culture.
And the thing I like about this text, it says the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things. The people wanted to, not that they wanted to rejoice, that's clear, right? But I think that there was something about this liberation act, right? This one woman, right? They probably seen her for many years. They've seen her in this condition. And I think a lot of times, we sometimes are afraid of, well, what if I do something? How would the people respond to that? And I'll say, if you're about the case of liberation, it would probably bring joy. That's rejoicing. It would probably bring joy to more people than the one person or the leaders that are against you, right? People are looking for these moments, for these shifts, because many of them probably were feeling it. I'm sure she was not the only crippled person in Galilee, right? We know that for certain. there's other folks that could get some hope based upon what this change agent has done. And I think that's important for us, that the work that we're doing not only affects us, but it can help bring some level of joy to others as well.
And if I take your framework and massage it just a little bit, if she's a regular in attendance, and even if they do see her and do nothing, it may be that they feel powerless to do anything about her situation.
Yeah.
And so now the rejoicing is there is hope, and something can actually be done when we allow Christ to be the center of the temple, or well, not the temple, but of the synagogue, of the faith community. And that might be part of why we feel as church people so impotent about some of the things in the world, because we've just consigned ourselves to a level of hopelessness and powerlessness. But what Jesus as the change agent shows us, if we just see people, and if we touch people, and if we begin to redirect attention, we too can start creating new cultural norms. And I think that's what's important, because we are never, as the people of God, powerless. Never are we powerless. I get angry sometimes at church folk when we act as if we are powerless. You know, I live in PG County, and sometimes they got boys and girl groups at churches out with buckets asking for, you know, donations. And I get mad, because I'm like, these boys can go to work. We're teaching them to beg rather than work. So, you know, let them wash some cars rather than just stand on the corner with a bucket asking folk for generosity. Teach them to work. That's a way of reframing the situation, rather than just perpetuating a sense of helplessness where I got to ask for handouts. You know, put them to work. You know, that's what we did as a football team. We needed to raise money. The whole team went to work. You know, and the money that was raised went toward the team. Put them to work. Do something, because that's, in some respects, a sign of helplessness. Now, there are some folk that are helpless. This sister that came was helpless.
There's nothing anyone could do.
But you know, when you are able-bodied and can change your situation, and you then are asking for handouts, that's to me something that just doesn't set right. Go to work. Do something. You know, shine some shoes on the corner. Do something, because there's no shame in menial work as long as it's honest work. Do something.
Someone in the chat said, mow some lawns. That's what he said.
Do something. Rake some leaves. If it's wintertime, you know, put them to work. Shovel some snow if it comes. But you know, rather than just asking and teaching a helplessness, when you can, and reinforcing that when you can do something. Now again, there are some people that are helpless. They need that kind of help. But when you got able-bodied people that can do something, and you just sat around with a bucket, I don't see that as a solution. Maybe I'm just old-fashioned and I'm getting old, but that's, you know, that. And I want to tell the folk, put them boys to work. That's what my daddy did.
You should call the church and say, listen,
Put 'em
I'm
to
tired of
work.
y'all seeing these boys out here asking for money. I have a lawn you can mow.
I got some lawns to mow and some we got some old women and some that are single that could, you know, put them to work, and we will pay you for that. But sometimes I think we continue what Pavlov called learned helplessness. That's not the way to handle this.
So, I mean, as we end this Bible study and end this series, we're a little bit over time. Thank you, Sister Jean McKinney. The Good Samaritan story is Luke 10. I'll try to commit that to memory. But one of the things that I think I asked you, I think it was 2 Wednesday nights before. So as we think about becoming change agents, and this will probably be our final word on this for now. We think about becoming change agents. What are some things we should think about this week from the text, or even from the past 4 weeks, that we should ponder on around how do I become a change agent? What are some high-level thoughts that we can grab hold on for this week ahead? And I encourage people to write it down or jot a note down about it, so we can continue. We don't want it to just end here, but we want you to continue thinking about this. So
Yeah.
some ways we could think about
I think
this.
if we look at this particular text, who do you see? Who do you see?
Yeah.
And how are their lives jeopardized or imperiled? And then how might you change that situation with the gifts that you have?
Yeah.
So part of it is being willing, as Jesus does, to offer himself to the situation. And that requires, again, risk and going against the grain. So it requires courage.
Yeah.
So who do you see? And then the other question that I think, if I see them and I know that I can do something about them, then the question is, are they worth it or not? And invariably, they're worth it.
They're always worth it. Yeah.
They're always worth it. Which then allows us to see, I think, ourselves in the larger, broader human family.
Yeah.
They're worth it. And that's what Jesus does. This is a daughter of Abraham.
Yeah.
She is worth it. She's more valuable than a donkey or an ox. And then I think the other thing that we have to ask ourselves is, she was bound by the devil. How are we bound by our religion that keeps us from embracing and liberating? Because that's what's going on here. They're bound by the customs, the culture, the law. How does our religion hold us hostage?
Yeah. We could go very deep on that one alone. But yes. So what are we seeing? What is it asking of me to do? The courage that we need for that, to meet that moment. Also trying to better understand, are they worth it? Which is a little rhetorical, but but to put it in real plain language, I can either spend this $5. Someone comes to me, asks me on the street, and I have $5. You spend this $5 for coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, or I give this $5 to this person. And the question I really have to ask myself in that question is, are they worth it? Are they worth a cup of coffee? Right? I mean, that's how Jesus.
And am I going to be inconvenienced?
Am I going to be inconvenienced for that? And the question is always, they're worth it. The answer, rather, is always they're worth it, right? So, and how are we going to inconvenience ourselves for that? So I think those are some great things for us to think about. I lost the last one. Do you remember? I just lost it.
Don't
It
remember.
just through my head.
But I mean,
told you all to take notes.
If we connect the whole series, then that becomes part of our mission.
Yeah.
Of loosing people and letting them go.
Yeah.
And it becomes part of our challenge to be the change agent. Because the goal of this thing is, we are never powerless. Never powerless. We always have the ability to do something.
Yeah. And if you did your spiritual gifts assessment, you can then see how you can use your gifts to then better. I'm still going to plug it, Reverend Walker. You can see how you can use your gifts to help in any given situation, right? At least help you think about it. But we want to thank you all for joining. We're way past our time. Thank you all for coming in person. We will be continuing on a new series, as we hinted to, about self-care. More details to follow as that gets a little bit closer, which is like next week. But we want to thank you all for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on Sunday. We have so many things going on in the life of the church. Please stay on. Please listen to the announcements to see how you can join in on the party here at Mount Olive Baptist Church. Want to thank you again. See you next week. God bless you.
God bless.
Hello, and welcome to Mount Olive Baptist Church. Here are your upcoming events and announcements for this week. Join us as we celebrate our very own Pastor Reverend Dr. James E. Victor Jr. to honor his 22nd anniversary as our senior pastor. Reverend Victor was installed as the pastor of Mount Olive in June of 2002, and we are grateful for his 22 years of dedicated and faithful leadership. On Sunday, June 2nd, we will celebrate and welcome guest preacher Reverend Dr. Ezra A. Tillman Jr., Senior Pastor of First Baptist Church, Piney Grove in Lauderdale Lakes, Florida. We look forward to celebrating this milestone with our pastor and can't wait to see you there. Seniors, you're invited to a tasty lunch fellowship to kick off the summer. Join us on Sunday, June 2nd, for our senior lunch and fellowship immediately following our morning worship service. This lunch event is for Mount Olive members and guests ages 70 and older to connect with one another, savor good food, and gather together for fellowship and fun. Please register to attend by visiting mtolivebc.org/senior-lunch. The Mount Olive family congratulates the class of 2024. Join us for our annual graduation weekend, which will be held on Saturday, June 22nd, and Sunday, June 23rd. Our Education Committee would like to honor and recognize all graduates to celebrate their remarkable achievements. All graduates are asked to submit a graduate profile form online so that we can receive your name, college, degree, and future plans. Please visit mtolivebc.org/grads or scan the code on the screen to complete your graduate profile and headshot photo by this Saturday, June 1st. If you have any questions, please contact Brother Terrence Smith or Reverend Sabre Jones via email at info@mtolivebc.org. The Benjamin and Almeda Martin Scholarship Fund applications are available to Mount Olive members who are high school seniors and returning undergrads. An information session for students and parents pertaining to the application process will take place virtually via Zoom on Wednesday, May 29th at 8:00 p.m. Register for the information session online at mtolivebc.org/scholarship. Completed scholarship applications are due Sunday, June 9th, and can be delivered to the church office or submitted online. For questions, please contact Brother Terrence Smith at terrencejamal.smith@gmail.com. Calling all kids and teens. Youth Impact Sunday is on Sunday, June 9th, and we want you to be a part of it. Whether you love to sing, act, or just want to join the festivities, there's a place for you. Rehearsals are every Saturday through June 8th. Parents and caregivers, please note these important times. Youth choir rehearsal for singers starts at 1:00 p.m. on Saturdays. All other children and teens can arrive at 2:00 p.m. on Saturdays to rehearse for the program. Our guest preacher for Youth Impact Sunday will be Reverend Rachel Baltimore, Assistant Pastor of the International Community Baptist Church in Chantilly, Virginia. We look forward to supporting our children and teens as they celebrate, connect, and shine on Youth Impact Sunday. Save the date for our 9th annual Scholarship Golf Classic. Join us on Tuesday, September 10th, 2024 for golfing and fun in the sun as we raise funds to help young people fulfill their educational goals. Our committee is currently seeking in-kind donations to be raffled at the tournament for our scholarship fund. Are you or someone you know a small business owner that provides products or services in the DMV? We would love to connect with you about in-kind donations to support our scholarship fund. please contact Sister Alora Kilgore at eskilgo28@verizon.net. More details about sponsorships and ticket sales are coming soon, so stay tuned. Put away your suits and sport coats this summer because Casual Sundays are back, beginning on Memorial Day weekend. Feel free to dress in comfortable attire starting today and during the summer months for church service and Bible study. Join us as we come together in a relaxed and welcoming atmosphere for worship, dressed comfortably for the occasion. Thank you for listening to our upcoming events and announcements for this week. Stay safe and stay blessed.